Welcome to the Rethink Vertical podcast. Today's episode is sponsored by Vigilant Aerospace. Vigilant Aerospace is a provider of Flight Horizon, the leading multi-sensor, standards-compliant collision avoidance system for uncrewed aircraft and advanced air mobility. It's based on 2 NASA patents and provided in both onboard and ground-based versions. Flight Horizon helps to keep pilots aware and aircraft safe when flying beyond visual line of sight. With plug-and-play radar, transponder, and autopilot integration, a 3D airspace display, and advanced UTM server built in, Flight Horizon takes the risk out of your drone and advanced air mobility projects. You can check them out at vigilantaerospace.com. Today we have a great episode entirely based on the quality of our guest. JJ Snow is a retired Air Force intelligence officer and current venture partner for Allied Ventures. JJ served as the Chief Technology Officer for AFWERX, the innovation arm of the U.S. Air Force, and the Chief Innovation Officer for SOFWERX and the Donovan Group at Special Operations Command. She served 3 combat tours with AFSOC, JSOC, and SOCOM NCR, supporting operations across Afghanistan and Iraq, and has held multiple leadership roles within the Special Operations and Special Mission Unit communities. Our conversation today centered around interesting technology applications in the emerging aerospace industry, how founders can utilize DoD and commercial opportunities to get their startup funded, and how to pitch hardware-focused technologies. I always learn a ton when I talk to JJ, and so I hope you enjoy today's episode. All right, excited about our guest today. JJ, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks so much, Craig. It's great to be here. It was really great to see you out in Tulsa, and this is going to be a fun conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots to talk about. And I think, for the audience, we get a mixture of folks, sort of industry experts, as well as some folks, founders, and then even investors. So I think it'll be interesting to cover just different pieces of some of the things you've learned in your new role. And but before we do that, I think you've had a very interesting career path. And so I think it'd be cool for folks to kind of hear kind of where you came from, how you got where you are, and what you're doing right now. So feel free to just kind of jump into it.
Sure. Well, I'm really fortunate in that I had the opportunity to serve in the Air Force for over 20 years. That was just such an incredible experience. Not only did I get an opportunity to go on to graduate school, but I also got to work with a lot of very unique, deep technologies. I did a lot of work with special operations, a lot of work with Department of Energy, National Security Agency. And that experience really set me up for success. It was the first 10 years. The second 10 years of my career, I focused more on how to facilitate government to private sector collaborations. So, for example, starting work at SOFWERX, how do we bring public and private sector together around those critical technologies that are dual use that we want to see the companies succeed, and we bring the resources together, the right expertise together. So I spent 3 years doing that at SOFWERX, and then my final tour was with AFWERX as their Chief Technology Officer, and I got to do more of the same there. Just tremendously rewarding working with these early stage companies that have so much passion and a vision for the future that they want to build, and then watching them as they grow from a pre-seed company up through their A series and beyond is very, very rewarding. So I learned a lot having one foot in the public sector, one foot in the private sector, and being in those roles. I think that really set me up for success too.
Yeah, getting to see both sides of that from while also still in active duty is that's probably not a job that has been around a long time. Having folks with the ability to kind of have a foot in each one of those areas. Let's talk a little bit. I hear this a lot about you, super networker. Do you hear folks refer to you that way as a super networker? I'm more curious about the value of networking for startup founders. Like, a lot of the folks that we work with are technology focused founders, right? They're engineers by trade. They're really focused on building a really good product. And then all of a sudden they realize, I need some additional support or funding or resources. And like, how do I go and get that? And how do I build that network? You want to talk a little bit about maybe kind of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and this is such an important question, and it's such an important topic. If you want to be successful, you need a network. And I learned this early on. First and foremost, I learned it in my time in the military, specifically from working with the Green Berets. I didn't have dedicated air support or dedicated ground support in Afghanistan or Iraq, but the Green Berets, they do foreign internal defense. They build networks organically to help their operations succeed. what I learned from them, all I did was I took that and then translated into how do I build value-based networks that everybody can win in. And so I took that expertise building on the ground in deployed areas in combat zones and brought it back here. And I started to do that for SOFWERX and then later on for AFWERX. When you're building these networks thoughtfully, you can create a lot of value by choosing the people that you want to bring into your networks, like really vetting them. I started with about 110 people. We were looking to build the Hack a Satellite Challenge for the Air Force. And so we started to reach out to ethical hackers and talk to them about coming in and looking at vulnerabilities on different satellite platforms. And that's how the Hack a Satellite Challenge developed. But from that 110 people, I slowly started to grow my network beyond that. And I was very thoughtful about how I built it. A lot of people will just say, hey, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm just going to accept every invite that comes my way. And I'm going to have like 18,000 followers, 20,000 followers. That's great. But how many of those people are actually bringing value to the areas that you're passionate about, to the businesses that you're building?
Yeah.
That's a big deal. That's really, really important.
Right.
So, one of the big things that I learned was it takes a long time to build a value-based network. But if you build it correctly, because I started building mine in 2014, I have now just over 25,000 people. I know all of them in person or 1 degree of separation. And I can email those people, direct message them, call them and say, hey, I have a project or a team I think you should talk to. And because they know me, they know my reputation, they also know that I have a no jerks rule. Anybody that I introduce them to is going to be a good person that's going to bring value to what they're working on, and then also help them access other value-based propositions, sometimes really unique synergies that will complement their existing projects, or even open access to new projects or new sectors that they didn't have access to before. That's why it's so important to be thoughtful about how you build your network. It takes more time, but it brings more value when you do it that way.
Sure. Yeah. You think the time thing is something I think about that. Um, if you have that mentality, like meet as many people as possible, then it does decrease the value of even just your time that you're allotting, right? It's so, I mean, I'm naturally an introvert too. So I'm always very selective on like how much energy, that I have available for just interacting with folks. And so, but I know a lot of folks that are extroverts. And so they're like, I just want to meet everybody. And it's like, okay, well, that's great. But at some point you have to figure out like who you actually connect with, who can who can bring value to your network, but what value can you provide to them, right? It's just not take. You got it's kind of a give and take. So, yeah, I know that a lot of the accelerators and stuff that we work with, that's something they really focus on. It's like you've got to get out there and you've got to start meeting folks, and you've got to do some due diligence, right? Not everyone you meet is going to be a valuable relationship, and it takes a lot of time. So. Yeah, I think it's an interesting conversation, and something folks should think about as much as they think about like building the company that they're trying to build, because it's gonna pay dividends in the end.
And it brings, if you bring the right people in around your company is going to be successful. They're going to see to that, because there's a personal relationship that develops, there's trust that develops, there's credibility that develops, and that reputational aspect is a really big deal. If you're high integrity, high credibility, then a lot of people are going to want to come and work with you. And when they're working with you, you're also conveying that back to them on their projects. And so there's this mutual effect that really serves to boost different brands or certain efforts. And I've seen it in action. It's really, really powerful. You get the right people in the room and they can open doors because others know the value that they bring. They know that they're trustworthy. They know that they're highly credible, and they want to be part of that network, or they want to be part of that project. So that's a big point, and I can't stress that enough. Having that level of credibility, that integrity, and having people that are coming together around something that they're really passionate about, aligning yourself with those people as you're building your business, especially from a startup perspective, it might be time consuming, but it's very, very worth it.
Yeah. Do you have maybe a single piece of advice or example for a brand new founder, never started a company before, has an interesting idea, they're starting to build a company, maybe have some angel investment, or some of their own dollars into this company, but maybe they come from an industry that's not doesn't have a defense focus or an aerospace focus. Like sorry about that. How do they make that first connection or first couple connections to start to build that network?
Yeah, and that's another great question, Craig. I think being willing to reach out to people
Mm.
that either you know or that other people know and ask them for help is one of the biggest challenges out there. I see a lot of people, they don't want to admit what they don't know.
Right.
Do it. Say, I don't know, and ask people. One of the biggest reasons for my success coming out of the military was about 7 years before I retired. I was working with private sector venture capitalists, senior vice presidents, CTOs. All of these people took the time when I asked them to sit down for a coffee call. Several of them have become long-term friends and mentors, and they help me to be successful on the outside.
Mm.
Because from a defense perspective, I could speak government, but I didn't speak the geek on the private sector
Right.
side very well, so I needed
Right.
help there. And they'll teach you, and
Mm.
people really want to help. They have exceptional knowledge. My friend Toby Redshaw has been a longtime friend and mentor. We worked on Department of Energy projects together. He's exceptionally successful, and he is just a fantastic mentor. And I told him, I said, hey, I really love what I'm doing with startups. I'd love to keep teaming with you and learn from you, because he's worked with, I don't know, well over 100 startups now.
Hmm.
When I get out, he said, okay, let's do that. But before that happens, let's start having conversations about where you want to wind up, the kinds of companies you want to work with.
Yeah.
Same thing for a brand new startup founder. Reach out to those people that you know of, that you respect, that you want to hear more from, and have a conversation, whether it's Zoom or Google or coffee or email, whatever it happens to be. Reach out. You'll be surprised. I think of all of the people I reached out to, maybe five of them said no initially, but it was usually
Hmm.
because they were traveling or their schedules are slammed, and we caught up at a later date.
Right.
Everybody was so gracious with their time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think folks will be surprised if they actually reach out. Folks want to share their knowledge, right? They want to be able to share that with somebody, not just keep it to themselves. So, really good
I
advice.
agree.
All right. So let's talk about your role now with Allied Partners, strategic advisor. You get to do
Yeah.
some, you get to meet with some really cool companies. What are some, we don't have to go into details on companies, but what are some technologies that are super interesting to you right now that you're kind of following closely? Well,
Oh
specific to
gosh, there's
the
so
let's say, since this is sort of a emerging aerospace podcast, let's say things that may touch the aerospace industry. Let's refine it
yeah.
down just a little bit, because I know you look at a lot
Sure.
of stuff. So
I
yeah,
do. I do. I see
yeah,
about 40 different companies coming through my inbox every week.
right.
About 20% of those are, they've got something, and about 5% of those will actually be successful. And figuring out the teams and the tech that are going to be that 5%, that's what I love doing. And
Mm.
I feel like I do that really, really well. So some of the teams I'm excited about is specifically looking at drone technology or even eVTOL technology. Um, has to do with the greening of the technology. So some really
Mhm.
exciting developments as far as electric engines go and electric power. Some really exciting developments as far as autonomy.
Mhm.
I'm excited to see that you now have large language models coming into play where artificial intelligence is being used and a human operator can work with multiple drones, and they're speaking to the drones, and the drones are
Mhm.
speaking back to them through a headset, and they're able to direct the drones, whether this is a mapping project or they're looking at agriculture or maybe it's something that's happening in a conflict zone. This is just tremendous. For example, there's a one company that I'm working with now. They're very early stage, and they've got an artificial intelligence with large language models that allows you to control up to 10 drones at a time.
Mhm.
Well, when I look back at Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Rita, and my time with pararescue, every single one of our pararescue men would have become so much more formidable in that
Right.
situation, as far as identifying people to rescue, identifying, potential hazards, especially in the flooded areas where you had down power lines or chemical contamination. Identifying safe zones to either land in or to drop supplies to people that we couldn't access yet. It would have been the same with Fukushima. Instead of sending people in to assess the leaks and the danger areas, you actually could have used drones to do this. And one person controlling 10 drones, now you have 10 people, they're controlling 100 drones. Those drones are going out and then coming back with really great information and saving lives in the process. This is a capability that I'm just really, really excited about. And I tend to be an AI optimist. I know a lot of people think that, artificial intelligence, the Terminator is coming for our jobs
Hmm.
and our lives and everything else.
Right.
I don't think that's true. I think we have enough people talking about it, and enough people that want to see artificial intelligence used for good, that in this space, it's really becoming a powerful tool towards that end.
Yeah. Yeah, the AI. I mean, I have this AI conversation quite a bit. Well, we did a podcast pretty recently with Michelle Harper from MITRE. We talked a little bit about some of the AI impacts on the AM and UAS industry. Um,
Yeah,
you think about AI, right? Everybody keeps talking about it's a tool, right? It's a tool for
it
efficiency.
is.
All these things you gain. So what you're doing is you're combining multiple tools, right? Drones have always been a tool, a platform, and so you're just making two tools come together to become a better tool, right? An advanced tool. So
Exactly.
I think, do you think that the new DoD applications are really pushing the boundaries of what's being done, or is it going to come more from the commercial side, translating over to the military, or the other way around? You think?
I see a bit of both right now.
Okay.
There are pockets of really exciting innovation happening within the Defense Department, but I see those being augmented or accelerated by the private sector. And I think we're going to see a lot of the major leaps coming from the private sector side. For example, another company that I'm working with is doing some absolutely fantastic solutions that are responding to the need to increase cargo capacity while reducing our carbon footprint.
Hmm.
In this particular instance, you now have the ability to leverage 1 ton, 3 ton, or 10 ton gliders. So no CO2 emissions. It cuts down on the fuel cost by about
Hmm.
60%. And it allows you to service multiple cities as you're flying along a flight line, because those gliders can now break off and independently go to those landing zones, whether it's a field or it's an actual airfield. And then any aircraft can come in afterwards, and you line them up and they fly right back out with them. So you're also saving ramp space, which means fewer pilots and fewer aircraft can now deliver a greater amount of cargo to more locations. And we're doing it greener and cleaner. That kind of solution, that gets me very excited. And if I put my military hat back on, when we talk about a solution like this for the Pacific, or even for Ukraine, you're able to keep the pilots out of the missile or weapons engagement zones, and they're able to resupply troops that are on the ground in an island chain. Or in this particular situation, you could actually resupply all of Ukraine using three C-130s and these various cargo gliders in their different configurations, and they just go out and resupply the whole country. It's very, very impressive tech. They're already working closely with teams on the private sector side, fully funded on that side. Now we're talking with the Defense Department. Hey, how can we help you with your
Great.
challenges? So
Great.
that's just a good example of some of the innovation I'm seeing from the dual use perspective that's developing rapidly on the private sector side, that I think will be really tremendous for the public sector, for our military and our defense applications.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you walked us right into the dual use conversation. Then we've had this conversation in previous podcasts with some companies that are doing it from the investor side. You may look at this a little bit differently because of your background than some other VC firms that are out there. What do first? What is the general feeling from the venture capital world on dual use technology, and how do companies capitalize on the ability to do both? Maybe talk through that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. So I think it depends on the venture capital team. I've had
Hmm.
conversations with both. Some are really excited about the opportunity to leverage non-dilutive capital and to get in with a government stakeholder, or to get a long-term program of record government contract, or to leverage those dollars early on. And then if a government sale happens, that's great. If not, the company's managed to keep more of their equity in the process. But I also am seeing a growing number of venture capital firms, mine included, that's focused specifically on national security and working alongside the government to accelerate capabilities that are defense first and then have private sector applications second. And
Hmm.
that's something that I hadn't seen across the board. And the number of venture capital groups, early to mid stage, that are focused on that now are growing significantly. And I think that's a credit to the Defense Department in that they're hearing people come
Hmm.
back and say, look, we're not happy with this process. It's not easy to navigate. We need tools that we can access the friendly front doors of government more easily and understand. And we need shorter amounts of paperwork. You know, if you give somebody a
Right.
212-page document, that's really hard to navigate. But if you tell them, hey, tell us your concept, your solution, and how you solve a critical pain point or multiple pain points for us in 5 pages, a startup has the ability to do that. Those kind of conversations are really starting to change the thinking. Not everybody is excited about defense, and I understand that. Like, war
Yeah.
is pretty tough. Like,
Yeah.
you don't want to see that. But one thing I will say is, if we're smart about the technologies we invest in, we have the ability to prevent future wars. And
Right.
so, with that in mind, I always go forward looking at technologies that can either be a deterrent or can drive us towards diplomatic vice conflict decisions. And I think there are
Hmm.
a lot of options to consider there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, like you said, the ability for the military service branches to be a little bit more forward thinking, innovative on some of the programs. You talk about AFWERX, like, you know,
Yeah.
8 to 10 years ago, none of these programs, if they existed, I had never heard of them. But then now all of a sudden, it's like every startup in a really difficult hardware intensive or even software field like knows about these programs. You know, they're trying to engage in them in some way, and so that's a credit to the folks that stood those programs up and ran them, and folks like you that kind of helped make them successful and can continue to engage with them in your new role now, right? And connecting
We're
companies with those
really
programs. Yeah.
fortunate. And, Ash Carter really kicked off a lot of this,
Mm.
and his loss has been keenly felt across the defense innovation community because he was such a visionary and he was such a pioneer. But I think a lot of people embrace that vision and are carrying that on in his memory. And I
Mm.
love that you see the thoughtfulness that's starting to happen among the innovation groups in the Defense Department, ranging from DIU and where they're headed for their phase 3 under Doug Beck. Doug's got some great ideas. Very excited to see the replicator initiative coming out. That's going to
Mm.
be great
Yeah.
for this next year. And then also the use of SBIRs, STTRs, OTAs, a lot of flexibility in how we can fund these early companies, and a lot of conversations about, hey, maybe we should do performance contracting where
Mm.
you get your top 10 companies and they've got great ideas. Maybe they have a prototype. Give them 30% of that performance contract and say, build the prototype. We're going to have you field test it. And then the top 3 companies, they're going to get another 40% and they're going to commercialize that. And then at the end of the commercialization stage, one of those 3 companies is going to get a contract, but the other 2 are also going to be successful because throughout that process, once they hit the second phase of the performance based contract, they start to tap into the STTRs, SBIRs, and the OTAs. And that non dilutive capital now moves them along with the performance based contract through the valley of death. Valley of death
Mm.
no longer exists if you take that approach. So
Mm.
those conversations are happening. I know Pete Newell, Steve Blank have been and talking about that. They've got a wonderful event they host every year called Red Queen for the government to get together and spend a couple days just brainstorming about these ideas. So the conversations that I've been part of have been really positive, and I think for any of the venture capital groups out there, I would encourage them, reach out to somebody that's in the government or who knows, about these programs and learn a bit more about it, because it can really help your companies to accelerate their growth while preserving their equity, and then also may result in additional clients for them on the government side.
Yeah, no, great advice for sure. And I like to, chat with you so you can peel back the curtain a little bit at some of those conversations that are going on that have had to happen in the past to get the military kind of the place it is now on the contracting side. So as a startup founder, going into pitch your company to a firm like you work for, any advice for how to pitch a hardware intensive, very technical subject and get folks excited about it? I mean, the aerospace industry specifically. Yeah. Right. They're like, those, it's not a SaaS. This is not a SaaS play or a fintech play. It's like, okay, I'm gonna stop listening. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Right. It's funny because I advise a number of startups, and my SaaS startups are always easier than the hardware startups.
Sure. Right.
And it's because you've got a sunk cost, you're investing in something, and it needs to be unique, and it needs to be repeatable, scalable, and people want it for the lowest price point possible.
Right.
So getting into the conversation with a venture capital firm as an early stage startup, couple things that you want to think about. If you can get government grants to fund and accelerate that prototype, that's huge. If you can get government stakeholders, I started working with a company in the last couple weeks. They have really gone over and just done a fantastic job. They did 250 customer reviews on their own with different government stakeholders. They have 30 letters of interest from government stakeholders. And they're doing 3 proof of concepts with the potential to scale up to 30 different bases. That level of work and effort, when they came in, I said, wow, guys, this is great. I absolutely love what you got. This is really a game changer. You're leveraging the AI in a smart way. When you do that kind of prep and you walk in to have a conversation with an investor, they're already sold, because they see that you've done the foundational work necessary to be successful with a government customer, which is hard. And when they see that, it now opens the door for, hey, we're going to go ahead and fund that pre-seed round, that seed round, or that A series. Demonstrating the effectiveness of your solution, not being afraid to videotape it or to get out there and say, hey, this drone can fly for 80 minutes, 90 minutes, and it can hover and it can carry this much weight. Well, tell the investors, come out and see it. Don't take my word for it. Actually, let's set up lawn chairs and you guys can watch it while we barbecue.
Right.
And we've had teams do that before, and it's so impressive because they really are thoughtful about it, and they take the time to demonstrate the capability and the uniqueness and what they're solving for. And when you do that, you're going to win every single time. If you don't have a capability ready to go, that's okay, but then you should have a prototype, or you should have a video and animation demonstrating what you're going to build and how it's going to solve specific pain points. The last point I would say is being able to talk to investors, even at an early stage, about your total addressable market and why you think you have the right to win. That's a big part of the conversation. You may not have any clients yet, but if you can express very clearly why you have a right to win and how your technology is going to do that, that's also going to help you with that pitch. Be succinct. Succinct.
Right. Yeah. Too many times, like when folks, pitch to our angel investor network, what we see a lot are like really interesting ideas, but they haven't quite figured out what their market is, right? So they're asking for a lot of money, or sometimes it'll be a very generic, like, we think this is our market. Like, well, how did you get there? What's the data? And they don't really have a good answer for it. So then the questions, then you come back and say, well, you guys need to drill down a little bit more. Because we're the easiest crowd that you're going to talk to, right? The no's are going to get you much harsher from here on out, right? We're here to help in some way.
Exactly. And you want people to know that you're going to be a good steward of the money that they give you. So by showing them that you've done your homework, you know who the competition is, you know how you stand out, how you're different from them, you know the market that you're targeting. All of that speaks to, hey, I'm ready and I'm going to be a good caretaker of the money that you invest in me. People want to see that. And you can see that from different teams when they come in to pitch. it's very obvious the ones that have done the prep and they're ready to go versus the ones that are kind of, oh, we're still figuring it out. Take
Right.
the time to do the prep. It really makes a difference.
Yeah. Well, JJ, it's been a great conversation. I'm sure we could spend hours more just talking about things. I really appreciate your time. And
thanks for having me, Craig. This
Yeah.
was so much fun.
if you'd like to be a part of the UAS Cluster Initiative community and get access to more of our content, check us out at www.uascluster.com.